All right. So for today, we are going to talk about the king of the manlets, 4-6, Benito Juarez. So
Benito Juarez,
yeah, so this
the
is a special episode. Yeah, go for it, Austin. Sorry.
the manlet of all manlets of Oaxaca, a state
Yes, the
known for their
manlet of all.
manlets.
Yeah, 4-6. God fucking damn it. But yes, this is a special episode where me and Austin have decided that we are going to start talking about historical figures that have made an impact of creating, this liberal hell world that we're living in. And I got first dibs, and my first, choice is someone that I've grown to extremely hate. But after learning more a little bit about him, I've kind of grown to, sympathize a little bit with his plight and kind of know where he's coming from, but that still doesn't excuse his actions.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah, absolutely. It makes sense. Why why he did what he did.
yeah,
Like why he thinks the way he does, etc.
and it
But
also makes sense of why no one else really could have stopped him, because he he was the leader of Mexico during a very tumultuous period where pretty much there was kind of only real one consolidation, and that was under him. Even though there was obviously different ideas that existed.
yeah, yeah, there's no powerful opposition, right?
I mean, there are people that had different ideas of what liberalism should have been, but they kept their mouth shut because this was during a time period where, like, kind of like today with Trump, like like how he's a fascist dictator, so we all have to kind of stop him. Because to be honest, what Maximilian was kind of offering indigenous people was probably better than what the fucking liberals were offering.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Independence, basically, right?
Essentially, their own autonomy, which is
The
what
the
indigenous
founding
people
fathers would have loved him.
exactly.
All right, so
Well,
let's
not
start
really,
from the
because
top.
I mean, he's a fucking European. He's a European aristocrat that's essentially offering Indians their independence. I don't think the founding fathers of the United States would have loved him.
Oh yeah, no, I just meant they're fighting for their independence. So now you're gonna see indigenous people with statues of George Washington.
Well, I guess we should probably start with some context, because I think a lot of people, if you're listening to this, um, other than I mean, if you're listening to this and you're from Oaxaca, you're probably going to cancel us and you're probably getting the rope ready, but that's a different story. Um,
We're about to butcher your boys
yeah, we're about to
life and
butcher
times.
boys, and we're going to be canceled from Oaxaca and never be allowed to step foot in that state ever again, which sucks because I've never been to Monte Alban, but no, actually I have, but I would like to actually go with it as a fucking adult.
Oh yeah, I've never even been period, and I'd love to pretty much anywhere, city or
Whatever. I'm probably safe in my home state, so I think whatever. Get pissed off. We don't give two shits about Juarez and Guerrero, so that's fine. As long as I don't badmouth Guerrero or Alvarez, I should be safe. Or Lucio Cabañas. So yeah. So okay, let's start. So context we have to start is Benito Juarez was born in 1806. So you kind of have to understand the world that he was coming from, which is the world before Mexican independence. So, Austin, do you want to say something before?
when when you
Or should
when
I
you
say,
think
because
about
I'm more into colonialism.
I'll just start with this, and then
Okay.
you take over.
Yeah.
I think when you think about the church, so the church is just a huge theme in his life. When you think about the church and its place in Mexican society, during his childhood, you have to empathize with him, um, in his later policies on the church. What what
Yeah.
what growing up when you just saw the pure power and influence the
The
church
church
has,
owned
how it
25% of all land.
it just dominated Mexican life politically, culturally, economically. Like it was just such a huge institution in any
Yes.
sense of that word. And for better or for worse, I'm not actually the biggest critic of the church, to be perfectly honest. Um, but that being said, like I totally understand where his anti-clericalism came from, where his mistrust of the church came from. Just seeing
Yeah.
how powerful it was, how influential it was. That's really
Yeah.
just kind of my only point to throw in.
and Juarez's anti-clericalism actually makes more sense than most liberals, which it was just more like a fanciful idea that they didn't really have any, connection towards the church other than, oh, they went to mass like every Sunday or whatever. For him, it was a more personal thing. But yeah, in this time period, basically the church was one of the most powerful institutions in Mexico, period. And that's, dominated a large portion of his life and the life of many other people, but another part that also dominated the life of many people in Mexico, because more than 90% of Mexicans during this time period were indigenous, was the communal aspect of it, meaning the village, the pueblo. That was basically your world, your life. And I mean, and in this time period, the crown afforded indigenous people special privileges and protections as as members of a pueblo, a community that unfortunately later Juarez would get rid of, and that would fuck up their lives tremendously.
Yeah, that's a good point. Even so the church is often seen as, and it's true, like a remnant of colonialism, right? The church is obviously Catholic, which obviously the Spanish conquistadors like brought. But it's also, and we're going to get to this later. In Juarez's opposition to the church, that's also tied with his opposition to indigenous autonomous communities, because the church, autonomous indigenous communities and the church were kind of,
They were tied together.
they were
Like he saw
yeah,
them
they're
as
tied
part of
together.
Mexico's backwards past.
Yeah,
This is the mindset that so Juarez became a liberal before he was indoctrinated as a liberal. So he was very his mind was fertile to become a liberal. Like there are other people that became liberals later on when they were indoctrinated. No. Juarez pretty much was the ideal candidate to become a liberal
yeah, there it
because he
was, it's
lived it.
like yeah, he didn't need any convincing. He was naturally, just from his personal life, it's like he felt um personally slighted and disadvantaged in some ways because of church. Actually, why don't we get into that document, just like his education?
Yeah, so there is a document where he basically says it's essentially called like what was it called again? Uh like apuentas para mis hijos, like notes for my children. So essentially we're kind of assuming that he's writing this for his kids that he had with Margarita Maza, his wife, and he had a couple other bastards. Um but
as
but yeah,
as was the norm during this time.
yeah, that's probably true. I mean, there's probably a couple other leaders in Mexican history that had a bunch of children out of wedlock. Not Zapata, because Zapata was alpha and king, and he only stuck to one lady.
Pancho Villa had like a kid with like pretty much any girl in town.
Oh, that's true. Probably, I wouldn't doubt that would be a. But I digress. So essentially, what we begin with is first is um, Juarez basically talks about his origins as basically being born to Zapotec parents. He didn't know how to speak Spanish until he was like, a teenager, and he actually, was being taught in the church, which he also, lamented of how bad the education was. So you can already see where, and the way he talks about his, like, he barely talks about being indigenous. Like, it's barely even in his, supposedly something he's giving to his children that are obviously, so here's the thing in Mexican society for people who don't know, is that being indigenous is very complicated because the vast majority of Mexicans probably have more blood quantum, that type of stupid shit that the US does in order to say you're indigenous or not. Then, in there's probably most Mexicans probably have more blood quantum than people like, have like of Native Americans have in the US. That doesn't mean that they're all native people. Most of them being native is a cultural thing. So
Yeah,
to call Juarez an indigenous person, it's a very complicated question. Is he an indigenous person?
yeah.
Um,
He looks like, physically, his skin color, right, is brown, but
yeah,
he's got a comb over, and he wants to turn these savages into civilized people.
exactly. Because, I mean, there are basically like there. essentially is like the problem though is like, dude, like you don't like you're not teaching your children Zapotec. You're not, you know, you don't care about that culture. Like you're so ingrained and focused of being, you know, Europeanized. I'm like, are you really indigenous at this point? I mean, it's a very complicated question, and I don't know if I can fucking answer that.
Yeah, and he's not just like neutral toward indigenous people and indigenous cultures, and yeah, he's not just neutral. He's actively trying to turn them into a whole new thing. Like he's trying to change them. He's in many ways an enemy to traditional indigenous ways of life.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. I mean, because there are liberals who had ideas of like, no, 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 this is probably gonna fucking destroy their way of life, which many liberals wanted. Like, Luis Mora, like, you know, like basically the patriot, like the father of Mexican liberalism, essentially wrote some really fucking horrible things about indigenous people, saying we have to basically, you know, destroy this mentality that they have. Like, they can be, you know, like good, you know, Mexican citizens, but they have to stop being Indians.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I see so many similarities with the United States and Native Americans. At
Yes,
least when the US wasn't simply just trying to
exterminate them.
just exterminate them or just kind of expel them, like just remove them from the picture as much as possible.
Yeah,
When
to
and
the periphery.
in the few and far between times when they tried to assimilate them, obviously not.
The Carlisle boarding schools and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's taking the Indian out of the man,
Yeah,
right?
kill the Indian to save the man.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's pretty much the exact same thing, but the Mexican version. But it's cool because Benito's indigenous.
Yeah, so it's kind of like I said, Obama is basically blackface neoliberalism. Benito Juarez was basically, well, no one calls Mexicans Redskins or any of that awful slurs. So,
That's more
um,
American stuff, huh?
yeah, that's American stuff. So, probably dark face, or I don't know. I mean, because there are people that are of African heritage in Mexico. So essentially what basically Benito Juarez was, he's trying to be like, oh, you know, like I like, you know, that in order for everyone to be like me, we have to get rid of like the, you know, the way that these people are. And so I mean, yeah, I mean, but that's the way it kind of was.
Yeah, and obviously that's harsh. And it still is harsh. I think at the end of the day, like I'm not a Juarez guy. But I guess when you look at, first of all, this document that we were talking about, like Benito was personally, he I mean he faced injustices, right?
Yes,
Um
many odds, and a lot, and it was obvious to him that it was because of his skin color and his race.
his race and even and that, as well as just this
Also being
backwards,
impoverished.
it's like
Yeah.
society that that he feels he's living in. And in many
Yes.
ways, I mean, it is, but I would say a lot of societies are, I would say the one we live in right now is backwards in many ways too.
Oh
So
yeah, definitely.
it's
This one is back as fuck too.
it's not the only one,
Yeah.
but so, like, for example, it's like the guy just wants to get a decent education. The only game in town for that is the church. And then when he goes to church, I mean, he doesn't really go into detail, but he says they have a shitty education system, um, where basically they don't actually teach him, and they just discourage him and discipline him. Yeah, but without offering any kind of intellectual or substantive criticism or instruction. So it's like I understand that frustration. If, let's say, you genuinely do really want education, it's something that's really important to you personally and for even like your sustenance. I get that. But I guess the problem I have when just considering Juarez and his legacy just overall is the fact that he wants to extend these values to everyone else. Like it's kind of like I see him as like, just because he's having a bad time in this society, he needs to destroy it and fix it, um, without asking anyone else like what they
Yeah.
think, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Essentially, essentially, because Juarez basically thinks that he knows what's best in a way, or it's because he thinks that because of the way that he was able to succeed, he thinks that other people should do the same way, and damn everyone else who says otherwise. And that's what a lot of the liberal mindset was. And you know, that was, I mean, a lot of indigenous people obviously were horrified by that. I mean, and that's why you wonder why the fuck did some of them join the conservatives or ultimately sided with the French, because a lot of them didn't agree with what the liberals, you know, were saying. And because
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
this is something that this was actually really funny, just setting this kind of thing in classes with students who just weren't really familiar with the dynamics of conservative liberals and indigenous people during this time period. Because I think most at least Americans, they'll hear the word conservative, they'll hear the word indigenous, and they'll just assume that they're on opposite, they're just mortal enemies, and that liberals are at least more so allies of indigenous people. But it's
but
kind
it's
of
not just
the
in the
opposite
U.S.;
case
it's in
here.
Mexico too, because people think that Juarez was a defender of indigenous rights. I mean, that is a
Yeah,
common misconception that a lot of Mexicans really believe, because he was
yeah,
indigenous. So you would naturally think that he would also, you know, care about indigenous people.
yeah. Like the idea that he's like the champion of indigenous people, and it's completely delusional. But it's I guess I'll have to tip my hat to the propaganda of the Mexican state. I guess
Oh
they're
yeah, no,
selling that
definitely.
idea.
I mean, definitely. That was. I mean, that is you know, some top tier shit. I mean, obviously, no one. I mean, I think a good chunk of. No, I think most indigenous people didn't buy the Juarez myth. I mean, except for maybe people in Oaxaca, but you know, he's the, you know, the local hero there. So I mean, that's a different story. I mean, a lot of other people believe BS like about, you know, like in other Mexican heroes from their home state. So you know, who knows?
I think about it in really as a really similar comparison to the black community and Obama in the
Oh yeah, I
US.
mean, a lot of
Like
them
it's
know that
what did
he was a
he
hustler. Yeah.
yeah, what the hell did he do for you? I'm sorry, but and I'm not and that's not to say that Trump was any better.
Oh yeah, definitely
But
not.
I really do I besides any oh, this is bad. When Trump was campaigning, and he goes he tells like black people like, what the hell do you have to lose, right? Obviously that's condescending.
Yeah.
Um but I also think that there's an element of truth to it, in that, let's say from Bush to Obama, like the average just like quality of life for most black people just did not improve in any meaningful way. Like so I do there's truth to that. Like and
Yeah.
and
Oh,
and I see
well,
that
yeah.
with Juarez.
Yeah. So I mean, so yeah. So essentially, Juarez was someone who, I mean, it's hard to say if he really hated being indigenous, but I think he did feel that it's because the problem though is a lot with these people is that they probably think that, you know, the problem with indigenous people was their culture, and their culture was tied to them being, you know, backwards, lazy, and incompatible with capitalism. You know, the same way how a lot of people believe the same thing about black people, or you know, people that are Latino or stuff like that. So I mean, in a way, I mean, liberals of 19, I mean, even liberals today kind of think the same way too. You know,
Yeah,
they
I
just
think
obviously hide it.
yeah, that's also a huge just focal point of Juarez's gripes with like indigenous cultures, is how it's just incompatible with capitalism. So
Yeah,
it's like individual property, individual rights, um market economies, and let's say bourgeoisie professions and industrialization. Like these
yeah,
things are all kind of these things are all just naturally at polar opposites with autonomous indigenous communities.
that are
um
self-sufficient.
la-
Like they don't
yeah,
need to be part of these you know, international markets that Juarez believes is the key to saving Mexico from its you know, backwards you know, impoverished state that it faced itself after, you know, the Mexican War of Independence that destroyed the silver mines. the continuous like conflicts between federalists and centralists, and then later liberals and conservatives, the several US intervention, like the foreign interventions by the US and the French and other European powers, and later secessionist movements like in Texas and within the Yucatan. So I mean, the coffers of Mexico were bled dry during this time period.
Yeah, yeah, and this is kind of a funny side point. You want to know why there wasn't really any major foreign interventions in the period? I mean, once Juarez executes, what's his name, Maximilian?
Yeah, Maximilian.
Maximilian. After from his time all the way to Diaz and the Mexican Revolution, there isn't really any foreign or any major foreign interventions, right?
Yeah.
It's because Diaz and Juarez are already globalist capitalists. So why would a foreign country need to intervene? Like they're already getting everything they want from them, right?
Yeah, exactly. They get exactly everything that they want from these people. So there is no need for that. So the problem is like indigenous people, it's not that they refuse but they want to be in this system under their terms. And sometimes that means they'll refuse it. And that's unacceptable to Juarez and to other liberals.
Yeah, the opposition to Juarez's land reform, the how would you describe it? Like the privatization of communal lands? How would you describe that?
I mean, the problem, the thing is like a lot of communities would just basically not enforce it, or they just wouldn't do it. Basically, it would have to come at the point like of gunpoint where they would be forced to do it, or they would find ways to basically, just squat on the land, keep using it, not obey, the law, meandering. So they would have a ton of ways of being able to, skirt around it. And Juarez didn't have the manpower to basically stop that. I mean, there was bandits everywhere during his reign.
Yeah. So, as poorly enforced as it was still a pretty seismic change, right?
Essentially, what Juarez did was he was the foundation to start this shitty process.
Yeah, and Diaz was like a much more muscular enforcer, right? Of Juarez's vision and general policies.
Well, he had the resources to do that, because by then, like basically all the threats to the liberals had been eliminated.
Yeah. Diaz also had a better balance or a better.
Well, we can get to him. Like let's go back. Let's go back. So essentially, Juarez, was he did odd jobs until eventually he finally was, and there's other biographies that talk about how he fucking hated doing these jobs, how he felt like shit, how we just said that. And then he, joined these religious schools that wanted him to become basically a priest, and were kind of sidetracking him to be one. And it was obviously in his autobiography that he was writing to his kids, is that he really didn't want to be one.
Yeah. He clearly has disdain for most priests, or at least the what he views as like the huckster local priest, right?
Well, because I think it's going back to his liberal mindset, where he thinks that the priest should be for the people. So this is liberal, type of view that like, that they should be more engaged in secular affairs than just being doing reading from their pulpits and giving mass.
Yep, and they should always be pushing the modernization, or at least
the cultural Marxist agenda.
Oh, well, partially that, but I also just meant the Western, let's see, the Protestant work ethic. Like that's what a preacher is supposed to, the values that they're supposed to extol. Or at least, like, honestly, because when I think of Juarez, I think he would have been a better Protestant than a Catholic. First of all,
I think so too.
I really think of him as like a white Protestant, like a founding father in the United States.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, but it's because a lot of these people wanted indigenous people to become like independent yeoman farmers.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly all he wanted.
But the problem with this shit is that you're talking about white settler colonialists that are basically, have this mindset, that I'm going to take all this land. It's mine because God gave it to me. You're essentially trying to replicate that system with a group of people that are like, this is my land since like, like my forefathers have given it to me, and I'm going to, respect it and not pillage it because I'm not a dumbass, from some
Yeah,
poor family from Ulster.
yeah, exactly. It's like for the white settlers, they're literally seeking profit, or
Exactly.
just improved
Their
improved
shitty way
commercial
of life.
standing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, like they're looking for a better life.
I
Whereas
mean, you
the
come
like
from poor Europe, like like where you would probably like be begging on the streets, where now you have your own acre.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And then it's you compare that to someone who's just been living in their in their native community for generations upon generations. Like it's just a fundamentally different um motivations. So
So
it's like it should be
liberal. So
expected.
yeah, so you're wondering why Mexico was never able to surpass the United States. It's because in this capitalist bullshit game, is because Mexico had people that were fucking stupid that were leading it. I mean, I'm not trying to say that they're that that Mexicans are dumb or they're inert or unable to progress. I mean, obviously we're seeing how well capitalism has basically functioned for most Americans. What I'm just trying to say is like most Mexicans were being really stupid and not like I know people can say they were being idealistic, but no, they were really being stupid and thinking, yeah, we can do the same thing of the way that we had there. I mean, most of them eventually, like the more pragmatic and realistic ones, like Diaz, kind of realized that that was a horseshit theory.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's why I think that's why first of all I'll take Diaz over Juarez. Um
Yeah.
I think yeah, I think realistic is really the best way of putting it. I think Diaz was just well, first of all, I mean, I'm sure Juarez was well traveled, but Diaz just on purely as being a
He was a
in his
pragmatist.
military campaigns and a pragmatist. I think he really just like understood and saw in person different spheres of Mexican life. Like I really think that he had a great pulse of the desires and interests of popular Mexican society as well as
Yeah,
the elite as well as the military. Like I think he was just truly an
he was like
expert.
Bismarck, to be honest. He had like a real sense of realpolitik.
Yeah, yeah. I think he was a master,
Yeah,
and
master race craftsman.
and he knew how hard to push and pull in just certain directions to an extent that most political leaders of really any society um aren't on. Like Juarez, I think he was probably more idealistic, and he's like, all right, if I sign this document, I will magically end the church's stranglehold over Mexican society.
Yeah, if I
And
sign this document, it basically means that the conservatives are gone.
and then I'll sign this one, and then the native people will be free from
The
the
tyranny of the
binding.
old privileges that they were
Yeah,
given under the Spanish crown, the privileges that made them, have at least a decent way of living sometimes.
uh-huh. Like he I I kind of think of him as like a nerd. Like he's in a library reading all these all the books and just like literature of American liberals.
Or
Like I'm
French
sure he was
positivists as well.
uh-huh. Uh-huh. I'm sure he was like a huge Thomas Jefferson guy or something like
Oh yeah,
and that's
definitely.
great. I don't I'm not against like idealism at all. I think Juarez might have been a better advisor to like a Diaz. That's not to say that Juarez wasn't hugely successful. Um,
I mean,
but
he was
I
successful
also
in setting up the process for Diaz, but we can get
yeah.
into that later. So let's go back. So essentially, he doesn't want to become a priest, and so he basically he gets lucky. He escapes becoming an ordained priest by the 1824 Constitution that essentially royally pisses off the Catholic Church and basically makes it very hard to ordain priests. And so Diaz gets to go on his scurry way and go into law, which would eventually damn every other indigenous person for the rest of every other indigenous Mexican.
Yeah, could there be a more fitting career choice for Juarez being the the deliverer of American liberalism to Mexico than a lawyer. I think lawyer is just
Yeah,
like the quintessential founding father
it's a job
trade.
created out of capitalism.
Yeah, and it's also a I really just equate it with liberal bourgeoisie. I really think of Obama. I think of Thomas Jefferson. Um, it's just lawyers and
Because
liberal
lawyers are all about
capitalism.
land transactions, and
Yeah.
that's this is all the point of liberalism in the 19th century, about like lands, taxation, you know, you know, counting goods and like like what transactions are what, and like who owns what and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's like individual rights are and private property are pretty much the foundation of capitalism, right?
Yeah,
And lawyers are
the defenders
the
of it.
rule, yeah, the the rule interpreters of that, I guess, right? Like they're
The, the
I don't know, the
referees.
administrators of it. Yeah, the
Yeah, the
referees.
referees,
Perfect.
administrators. Yeah, they are who you basically. If you can't talk to the when you're a Karen, you can't talk to the boss. You go to you obviously step up and go to your lawyer.
Yeah, so it's just so fitting. And I was reading Tutino's just the stuff he had on Juarez and in his book From Insurrection to Revolution in Mexico.
Mhm.
Um and he's pretty adamant about Juarez's base. Actually, Carase agrees too. Enrique Carase, the liberal, in his Mexico biography of power. Um, yeah, Juarez's base is pretty much middle class, in an educated middle class professionals.
Yes.
So not the traditional landed elite, not definitely not definitely not the church.
So
Um,
those are conservatives. So basically, the landed elite and the church are basically on the conservative side,
mhm.
and then you have other liberals like Diaz or Alvarez or sometimes Santana whenever he's larping as a liberal. A lot of their base it comes from like the rural masses, the peasant
Mhm.
indigenous rural masses.
Mhm. Yeah,
But Juarez
it's
is not that, which is the exception.
yeah, it's fascinating that the first major um political leader in modern Mexico is pretty much an enemy to indigenous people. And then
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say he's the first major one because I mean, Santana was probably like before him, and he was probably like the head honcho for God knows how many years. Essentially, like the
true,
age
I
of Santana.
but I thought Santana was mestizo, no?
Yeah, but were you talking about indigenous or the first major indigenous leader? That's what we're saying.
Yeah,
I didn't hear you.
major, like on a national scale. Because yeah,
Oh, I'm
obviously
sorry. I'm
there's
sorry. I apologize. I thought you were talking about first major leader.
oh yeah, no, I meant major indigenous, yeah.
Oh, I'm
Um
sorry.
and it's just funny because Juarez is pretty much an enemy to anything indigenous culture, people,
Oh,
etc.
oh,
Um
hilarious.
and then it's again, it's like you hear conservative and the colonial elite, you would assume that they're on opposite sides as indigenous peasant communities, but they're not.
I mean, they
Um,
use them. I mean, they don't have
oh
nice
yeah,
things to say about them, and they're
yeah,
okay with maintaining the status quo. But the fucked up thing is that the status quo was kind of a little bit better for indigenous people.
yeah, because well, you just have autonomy, and honestly, I think
And you just have to pay
autonomy,
tribute, and they won't fucking force you to go fight in their stupid wars.
yeah, exactly. Like you pretty much get to live your life. So I don't. I mean, I'm sure like even
I mean, it still sucks, but I mean, think about the okay. So people have to understand how indigenous people lived prior to the liberal reforms. In indigenous communities, you had your communal land tenure that was essentially shared or divided amongst the groups of people, and then you would have your own plot of land. So you could use that or the other one. You would also then have to have certain rights, meaning you would have certain courts that only indigenous people could be able to access them. You also had you don't have to fight in these in you don't have to become a soldier, that other type of shit. I mean, there's a lot of other bad shit, like you couldn't actually own a horse, or you couldn't own this or that, or there was some restrictions and privileges. But eventually the what the liberals, eventually gave indigenous people was to, as Austin been alluding about autonomy, is to get rid of that, destroy the communities, and essentially get rid of what essentially makes a person an indigenous person in Mexico, which is the pueblo, the village.
Hmm. Hmm. And that, well, that's why I mean, I was about to just let
Essentially
this one go.
cultural genocide. So I mean, yeah, the conservatives sucks and they think indigenous people are disgusting, dirty Indios, but they don't think that they should, that they should be wiped out as a people.
Yeah. Yeah, as long as they're not really rocking the boat, causing problems for the elite, for the conservative elite, like it's cool. They're cool with it.
I mean, it's essentially like this is a fucked up comparison, but let me give you this. It's essentially if the North, won the war against the South, and essentially what they wanted to do to Black people is essentially destroy everything that made them being Black, and essentially kind of force them to be become white people, and get rid of every single ounce of African culture. So get rid of, all the food, the cuisine, like the clothing, the spiritual hymns, their churches, all that stuff, destroyed entirely.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. And that's
yeah, slavery is fucked up, and there's like, it'd probably be better not to have slavery, but the alternative is just as bad, or not as bad, but I'm just trying to say what I'm trying to give you an example.
yeah. I
And it's not
think
even
I
close,
think
to be honest.
I think
But
it's
continue.
I totally see the similarities because I think even to this day, a lot of white liberals in blue like coastal states, like in the Northeast or let's say the West Coast, they really don't understand why Black people are still in the South, moving to the South, um, or just yeah, prefer the South to the North. Because it's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, the South is racist. Why do you like the South? Um,
Because it's their fucking homeland.
yeah, it's like there's more to obviously that's a huge and horrible aspect of the South, but
Yes.
there's there's so much more to it. Like it's the same thing with well, maybe not the same, but it's there are similarities with yeah, the church and the Spanish crowns um role with indigenous people and why they would essentially most indigenous communities would probably prefer Spanish colonial rule to Juarez when he's the indigenous leader himself.
Yeah.
Um yeah, it's a crazy in some ways it's it seems insane, but it just shows you just all
Or I
the
think actually a better example is if the North came to the South and then basically started breeding Black people out of existence. Because that's actually ultimately what also happened in Mexico, but a little bit
yeah.
more that they kind of just said that their indigenous people don't exist anymore because they've been whited out too much.
Yeah, that's true. I
I mean, and
forgot
then
about that part.
Juarez is ultimately a proponent of this and is an example of this because he later married, a light-skinned mestiza, and then like obviously, I really doubt their children married, indigenous people.
Oh yeah, he probably told his kids don't marry those dirty Indios.
Yeah, probably. I'm 100% sure he told them that in private.
He said go find a clean shaven, um, well educated
I
priest.
remember one of his bastard daughters married a white person for sure, like a Frenchman.
Uh, of course, I'm not even. He set his kids up with Maximilian's kids or what?
I mean, that's for the whole Trump and Obama unity dynasty, but that's a different story. But let's go back to what we were originally talking about. So we are at the point where, so yeah, the 1824 Constitution comes along. Juarez is allowed to be a lawyer. He does his stupid lawyer, bullshit as being the lib that he's becoming.
Yeah.
Um, so, and then let's talk about obviously, his he practices law. I think he's starting to practice law in Oaxaca, as a civil judge and all that stuff. And then he marries, someone that's really young, the mestiza by the name of Margarita Massa, and I think her father was white. So yeah, Italian, I think.
And um, let's see. So we're at his lawyer career, right? How does he?
Well,
does he
let's talk a
break
little
it?
bit about him marrying someone of upper class society and what that says about him, I guess.
Oh
Because
yeah.
why would he marry someone of this type of standing? I guess like so like was there some kind of advantages to marrying someone of this, someone from like a merchant class family?
Yeah. Yeah, I think in pretty much every stage of his life, a common theme is he is actively pursuing um
Some kind of form of power.
some kind of form of power. I was going to be a little bit less cynical on it, but um I think that he's like I really see him as this genuine fanboy of Protestant capitalist culture, and he's everything he does kind of embodies his drive toward living a lifestyle um that liberal ideology would approve. So basically he's marrying into like a more um
More white.
educated by Western standards, yeah, family, white family, um pursuing education,
Mhm.
his legal career, his opposition to the church, to or his move for separation of church and state. Like it's
Yes.
the he's like literally brainwashed by the founding fathers, and I don't mean that to say like he's some
But I
puppet of
mean,
them.
the thing is like because there are liberals that are brainwashed into this bullshit, but like Juarez was already fertile, like like a liberal
Yeah,
before he was indoctrinated to become a liberal. So that's the difference with him.
yeah. I was about to say that's not to take away his agency. Like I think he fully chose. He thought deeply about all of these actions, all these ideas, etc. And like he's genuinely supportive of them. He's not being played or being fooled or anything here.
Yeah, I mean, because I mean, you might think like, oh, it's like the poor Indian being tricked. I'm like, no, this guy, had a lot of agency, as Austin is saying. I think also is that he might have, seen liberalism as a way to explain, the reason why he rose up and other indigenous people couldn't rise up.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Like it
think
explained everything perfectly to him. Like it's like someone who's like a crack addict, and then they find salvation through Jesus, like
yeah.
Michael Lendell, the pillow guy,
Yeah,
who's going to be our next
education.
president after Biden or Trump.
Yeah, education is, I mean, that was like his ticket out the hood.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's like the way he pretty much is thinking about it. And he
Yeah.
despises the hood. Like he wants nothing to do with it. Right?
Or it's like that
That's
one guy who wrote the Hillbillies book. What is it called?
oh,
Dan Young?
elegy.
Yeah, the Hillbilly Elegy. That
Um
guy fucking hates, redneck culture.
yeah. Yeah, it's yeah, that's pretty much exactly. It's like it's one of those people who just they're all they want to do is get out, and they're supposedly, once they do get out of wherever they're from, they're supposed to be like a symbol of success, and like, oh, this is what you can be. But
Everyone can do
then
this.
everyone can do this, when first of all, obviously it's not the case, number one. um like Juarez did have some useful connections that he was kind of just born with. Sounds like
Yeah,
who was his family, his godfather, whatever, it was able to like send him
exactly.
to the local school or sponsor him for some form of education. Obviously
It's
that's
the
not.
opportunities you have that, let you advance in society.
Yeah, yeah. So um even amongst his like indigenous peers, he's gonna have he's probably in a better situation, just born into, than on average, right?
Yes.
um but also beyond that, his education, yeah, his obsession with education. um
Yeah, I mean, he's a top model liberal, like subject, because he literally thinks education is the way to save everyone. If we just had enough people that could code computers,
yeah, and I think
we just had enough Indian lawyers in his case.
enough Indian lawyers who are representing white clients who are expropriating indigenous lands.
Oh yeah.
And then he'll expect the uh the indigenous loser of the lawsuit to thank him for enlightening them, for ending them of their savage ways.
Or making indigenous people into hacienda owners and getting their own Indian serfs.
Um, it's
It's okay. They're
I
both indigenous. It's like
um
using the N word. It's okay. They're black.
I I think Juarez would be proud, even considering, like, let's say he's just sitting in heaven right now
Right.
and looking down and
Probably
thinking
not.
back and thinking back on his legacy, on uh on his political career. I still think he would be proud.
Oh yeah, he
Um
did. I mean, now indigenous people are 10% of the population, so he did a good job. Well done.
he he saved Mexico,
Yeah, he
huh?
did. He saved Mexico, like in that one SpongeBob meme where SpongeBob and Patrick destroyed the city, and then SpongeBob tells Patrick, "It's Patrick. We did it. We saved the city."
Yeah, thank you, Benito. Where would we be without you?
Yeah, and Patrick is
Um,
Porfirio Diaz in this case.
um, it's it's funny to see how he's in pretty much all of his writing and just commentary on his policies and his projects as a leader. Um, he he says he's freeing Mexico. He's freeing indigenous people. He's doing everything he does for the best interest and the liberty of
Yeah,
Mexico and indigenous people, right?
yeah.
Um, and it's it's funny that well, first of all, I think he genuinely believed those things. I think he
No,
genuinely thinks he
I think
saved
so too.
Mexico.
It's
But
pretty
it's
obvious from his own memoirs that he really does believe that this is the way to do it.
mhm.
I honestly don't believe Obama. Like I think he's a cynical motherfucker because I think he can't be trusted. But I think Benito Juarez, for all the damages that he did, he was a true believer in the liberal project, and so did so many of these people that emerged from it. I mean, some of them obviously didn't believe in it, like Santana and Diaz, that were basically just using it like for memes and for power.
Yeah. Yeah. What I was going to try to get at, and to compare him to Diaz too, is he he says all these things like I'm doing this for you, basically, right?
Yes.
Um, but Juarez is pretty much a dictator, at least a soft dictator.
Mhm.
Um, I think he he did try to be as like liberal and democratic as possible. Um,
And under the
and
circumstances, it was hard. I mean,
oh
I'll
yeah,
give him
no,
that.
no, yeah, and it absolutely is hard. Like he's pretty much in a he's trying to rule an unstable society with I
With,
don't know, like with liberal laws, which is just, I mean, just hard to do. But that
yeah, I
being
mean,
said,
the thing that
um
people have to understand is that liberalism was a new concept that was created in the 19th century. It was a
mhm.
lot of people saw it as a foreign agent that wasn't Mexican.
Oh, and that's true. It absolutely is a foreign agent. Absolutely wasn't Mexican.
I
Um
mean, but it became something Mexican in itself too. So that you can't be counted out.
okay, yeah, yeah, there's a Mexican adaptation of it. For sure. Um I just mean like where it's originally coming from. Like it's emanating pretty much in the United States and like Europe obviously, but I would say
Right.
especially the United States.
But I
Um
do believe though, like that the Latin American countries were developing their own form of liberalism, and there were talks with other people, so they were influencing them. Like this is the type of meme that like, oh, like the U.S. and everyone else, influence, the rest of the world. But I mean, the rest of these countries were doing shit
oh,
that the rest, yeah. But
okay, yeah, I
but
see what you're saying. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's I don't mean to deny agency. I think it's like these ideas just existed in the United States, and then enough Mexicans, mostly organically, um just took to it
yeah,
and bought
they
into.
thought it was like like
Yeah.
they were like this made sense and that they could incorporate it to their own. I'm not saying that they all were like stupid morons that did the whole yeoman farmer thing. I mean, because obviously Diaz didn't believe in that bullshit nonsense for one moment. I mean,
Yeah.
Juarez is a different example. I mean, I'm not saying he's stupid, but he does do stupid things.
Yeah,
But
he's more idealistic.
Yeah, idealism usually means being stupid. Yeah, I'm sorry. It just means that you have brainworms. That's how it causes idealism. But let's go back to about his trajectory in his career. So it's he has a bunch of children. He has a bunch of bastard children. Let's talk about his political career, because eventually he does enter the Oaxacan politics.
Yeah, I wonder how he was like as a debater, as a public figure. Was he like a charismatic guy? Because I'm imagining him as a kind of a bookworm just sitting in the back of the room, just minding his own business.
Right. No, I agree with you too. So in the background, essentially, we have someone that most Americans are probably might be familiar with is Antonio Lopez de Santana. The guy who lost his leg in
Antonio Banderas, Chris. Antonio Banderas.
oh God, has he done any movies in forever?
Oh, I hope not.
Yeah.
But sorry, back to
No, it's
Antonio.
fine. It's fine. So essentially, this is the age of when Santana and his fucking personality is, all over the place, and he's, becoming a liberal or he's a conservative. And then, there's Fraias who's in the background as well. And then Juarez is, slowly advancing himself in, Oaxacan politics, and, eventually becomes, I think, the governor.
Yeah. I think sorry, this is somewhat on point. It's one thing that was relatively unique about Juarez compared to a lot of political leaders and in this time period is how he's genuinely committed to his political platform, whereas like
Yes.
Santana and pretty much most other political leaders that you would even know their name um would be willing to switch parties and ideologies at the drop of a hat.
I don't
If
think that many, to be honest. I think that was more of a case of Santana, to be honest. They do exist, but it's obviously hard to pinpoint them down.
because I'm seeing the the constant wars during this time period as mostly a a battle amongst elite um
Right.
for clout, and
Right.
they'll usually kind of be framed as some sort of clash of political ideologies, but they're not really ideological wars. They're usually based on regional interests.
Yeah,
um
that is true.
yeah,
Because a
and
lot of these
that's
people
really what
are
I'm
at this
getting
point
at.
are kind of liberals in a sense. Santana, even though he appealed to conservatives, he did kind of have a liberal mindset sometimes.
Yeah.
It's hard to pinpoint with this asshole.
Well, that's why I'm going back to the regional interest thing. Like
Yeah.
he'll just roll with whatever direction the wind's blowing,
Right.
to make it to survive today, and then like we'll see about what we'll do tomorrow, but this is what works for today, kind of thing, right? And
I
and
think
he'll
the,
switch
the problem with
pages.
Santana is that he was just trying to like play loosey goosey with both sides.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which is I don't blame him much for at least that time period. Um,
Oh yeah, definitely. People were
it's
losing their fucking heads for that shit.
yeah. There's just so many dispersed interests at play that
Yeah.
trying to balance power basically. I mean that would
Radical
be hard to do
liberalism,
for anyone.
federalism, centralism, popular
Hmm.
liberalism. God knows what the fuck is going on.
Yeah, yeah,
And then you
and then
obviously
you
have what you're talking about, the factionalism, like in the regionalism.
hmm and then you throw in invasions of just European countries. Like it just there's a lot going on.
Yeah, when Mexico get invaded by the United States, Juarez is the governor of Oaxaca, and essentially he doesn't really help, Santana when he asks for it, because it's like we're already fucking too late at this point, asshole.
Hmm. And I thought Juarez and Santana were basically enemies, right?
Yeah, so was Alvarez as well. All these people did not fucking agree with each other.
Yeah.
They did, but that's a different story. But we'll get to the liberals actually coming into power.
Hmm. Yeah. I wonder. I wonder if the U.S. never invaded, how Juarez's clout like would have been affected. Would he still have risen as as high as he did If the U.S.
Honestly,
never,
that's hard to say because I mean,
yeah.
he really became noticed when he, joined the plan de
Oh,
Alvarez, the plan de Ayutla, I think.
mhm,
Was it Ayutla?
yeah,
No, I think, wait, was it?
that was the well, that's kind of the seminal big big move that he's known for.
Yeah, so him joining the plan de Ayutla was important in, getting his, getting like, into the national level.
Yeah.
He's already there because he's the governor of Oaxaca, and
Mhm.
Oaxaca is important to, especially during this time period. But
Yeah.
it's especially during this time period where it does. But the question you're thinking probably asking, Austin, is like, would the plan de Ayutla had gotten the same type of support? Because a lot of it came obviously with, Santana fucking up royally, and not trusting other people to basically losing all this land to fucking United States and losing a war, which is humiliating.
Yeah, it's I love this. This was Tutina was commenting on the US invasion of Mexico, and basically there would be entire um peasant communities that would literally just like stand by and watch as
Yeah.
US soldiers are marching through.
Yeah,
And
the thing is, like Santana wouldn't even ask like Juan Alvarez for help because he was afraid that the guy would later take over, and kind of did. So Santana's fears were not unfounded.
oh yeah, no, that too. I was just gonna say that when studying like the Mexican or the American invasion of Mexico,
Yeah.
it is really surprising that the US so easily just conquered northern Mexico. But at
Mhm.
the same time, when you actually study the interests at hand for the majority of Mexican society, when this war is going on, it's it wouldn't really make sense for most people to give a shit if the US conquered communities that you have no allegiance to.
Correct. And
Um,
also these communities are very shallowly like interspersed with Mexican citizens. Most of them have already been
exactly.
taken by fucking Anglo settlers.
Yeah, yeah. And then also even
I mean,
establishing a national identity, that's
right.
not even like this notion that
There.
like, oh, I'm Mexican and I care about what happens in Mexico as a whole. Like that's kind of insane, like for most
I
people,
mean,
because
had the U.S. done something really stupid, how some, people, some Democrats were thinking like of taking all of Mexico, I think that probably would have been the dumbest idea ever, and that probably would have, had a drawn out guerrilla war that probably
yeah,
would have just destroyed the U.S.
yeah, yeah. No, that would have been a huge mistake because if I mean, yeah, if you're trying to take the whole all of Mexico, no,
Yeah,
it's going to
no.
be a nightmare to even to try to even occupy. Let's say you do conquer Mexico City, it's gonna suck. If the Spanish, I mean, the Spanish have been trying for hundreds of years to establish a stable stranglehold over Mexico, and they still weren't really able to do it completely.
I
So
mean, well, they did. They barely had any large rebellions, the Spanish crown, but that's because they had created a type of society that kind of alleviated a lot of pressures for rebellion. But the
oh
United
yeah,
States literally could not do that because there would be no legitimacy towards it.
yeah, and the U.S. is already practicing slavery. So I assume that they would try to just brutally enslave Mexico in the same way,
Yeah,
and not basically compromise like the Spanish do in a lot of ways.
and that would have probably
Um,
just heightened the fucking civil war and made it like happen earlier.
oh yeah, yeah, exactly.
Because that
So
would have been just a nightmare for the North. Oh, all this land is going to become slave territory. Hell no.
yeah, maybe the US knew what they were doing. Maybe they were even smarter than where they're like, wow, we don't even want the whole pie here. We only want a piece of it. It's too much trouble.
Because literally what they just wanted were some territories.
Yeah.
So like, and a lot of Mexican citizens were like, okay, we don't really have any connection to these fucking assholes up there, and like most of it isn't even Mexican anymore anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So when you're looking at it, basically if if your neighbor's getting beat up and your neighbor's a dick to you, why would you step in and risk your life for
Yeah.
your neighbor? It's that kind of thing, right?
Well, it's also if you like you say like like they have a friend and you guys are kind of friends together, but that guy also doesn't do shit, and also you're not gonna do shit, like even if that guy joins in, that type of shit too.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. Why
It's
would you die
complicated.
for? Yeah.
There's also the
Um.
whole thing that the United States had the 3 times the economy of fucking Mexico.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Just a matter is purely of resources. Obviously,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
different
no,
levels.
Mexico did not have the fucking logistics to fucking repel a U.S. invasion. I mean, had they stayed forever, I mean that would have been a different story. But I mean, cooler heads prevailed in Washington and didn't listen to some assholes that said no, take everything.
Um. So for Juarez, so yeah, there's a American invasion, whatever. But it's really the French invasion that.
Well, we should kind of start a little bit with because I mean, yeah, I guess we're kind of going to the point where we go to the point where obviously so now we start with the whole liberal and conservative complex. So obviously
Okay.
with Lopez, Santana, with Santana out of the way, now the conflicts between the liberals and conservatives have become heightened. Where they're really cataclysmic wars, and so the plan of Ayutla happens. They're able to oust Santana, and because of that, they're able to institute the 1857 Constitution. The Constitution that everyone fucking loves and essentially replicated with the 1917 Constitution, hilariously enough.
Yeah, and it's also it's important to note with these wars, like the liberal and conservative wars, I think they pretty much follow the same trend as the majority of wars during like Santana's era, where majority of popular Mexican society and just subaltern classes really just don't give a shit who wins for the most part, unless
Well,
it's like
not exactly. I mean, because a lot of the people that were fighting in Alvarez's side were indigenous peasants, and they did have a reason to fight for his side.
Yeah, I was about to say unless they had a stake in the war. So basically, unless like there was some kind of good reason for you to join this or really pay attention to it, it's something that could be ignored if it wasn't really affecting your personal community
But during this time period,
district.
though, with the liberal and conservative wars, so we're done with Santana. So by this point, though, most of Mexico is being dragged into this conflict, though.
But even then, isn't it? You would say it's bigger than like regional interests.
Yes, because I mean, hilariously enough, Alvarez fucking hated centralism, and he was a complete diehard federalist. But essentially, he was supporting a centralist regime, and that's kind of hilarious in itself because a lot of these people were coalescing together, under these new banners of being liberal conservative. So they were still it's paradoxical in that they're both regionalists, but they're also fighting like a national conflict, united in these coalitions.
Huh. Huh. So then, so we get to Maximilian and the conservatives. It's still a conservative liberal split, right?
Yeah, there's still liberal conservative split. So there's still a liberal conservative split going on here, and we get to the point where eventually should we talk a little bit about the 1857 Constitution though before we get to Maximilian?
Oh yeah, let's hear it.
Okay, what are the basic tenets of the 1857 Constitution.
Oh, okay, I would think of it pretty similar to the American Constitution, in that it's just really just like the generic document of liberalism. So it's privatization of church lands, which is huge, basically separating church and state, at least legally in Mexican society. Um, it's promoting not full on freedom of speech, but I don't know, what would you say, like a greater degree of intellectual freedom and
Yeah,
religious freedom.
essentially.
I
I
mean,
mean,
I think was Catholicism still the official state religion, just not
no, it
not
was no longer there.
okay.
Even by the 1824 one, they got rid of that. But then the conservatives made their own constitution. So here's the thing: whenever the liberals or the conservatives got into power, they would get rid of the fucking old constitution.
It's gonna be like the presidents now, where like the day a new president is elected, all like the executive orders and international or global relations are just gonna be ripped up, like Trump, his first day in office, whatever, like shit on the Iran deal and the Paris
Exactly.
climate accords, and then Biden's first day, it's like reverse it or whatever. Like,
It's hilarious. I mean, why don't we just make a new constitution every fucking president?
yeah, no, I would actually support that.
Yeah, I would too. I mean, just stop with this fucking executive order bullshit and just basically make a new constitution. I mean, that's what they did in 19th century Mexico.
Yeah, that's why 19th century Mexico's based.
Yeah.
But
You would say, fuck you for all this, you know, these long and hard work you made for making this shitty document. It's going down the toilet.
yeah, all the liberals will be in tears. They'll be like, we worked so hard on that.
Nothing better than liberal tears.
But oh yeah, so for the document though, it's
but the main tenets are essentially the ones that we've been talking about for a longest time: the ending of communal land tenure, and, you know, the confiscation of church property.
Yeah, those are the two most impactful. But I guess just if you're looking at it from like a intellectual historian perspective, like it's also, besides, because those are the most impactful, I would say, for their impact on the economy and they're huge. I
And
shouldn't just limit
society.
it to the
I
economy.
mean,
Yeah, no, they're just
society.
huge.
Yeah.
But I think it's just also like important to note that the freedom of speech aspect, the freedom of religion aspect, or at least the step in that direction from that document, that was also a first. So it's just a generic liberal constitution.
And then it's supposed to be, it had universal suffrage as well, but, you know, for men. But again, like just like the Constitution of the United States, it's whatever they want to enforce.
Yeah. So obviously,
again, so it's basically a meme document. So just like the United States Constitution, it's a meme document.
Yeah, just because it was written doesn't mean life is actually gonna be like that. But it's just the I guess, I don't know, the first step in that direction.
You just have to pay homage to it. I mean, Zapata paid homage to it, but obviously he didn't give a shit about it.
Oh yeah, it's funny because I mean, Juarez was notorious for vote rigging.
Yeah, that's true. Yes, his last election was fucking probably devious as that.
Yeah, he may or may not have legitimately won elections if they were real. I guess we'll never really know, but
we'll never know. I mean, the same way I will never know if, you know, JFK actually won his election legit.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I have to wonder if Juarez would legitimately beat Diaz in an election. I don't know that, but
I think he, you know, that's actually true because Diaz was seen as a hero.
Yeah, that's the reason why, because I think Juarez did have considerable popularity in his later years, or I would just say
more so his death, to be honest. But we'll talk about his legacy and, you know, his deification. But I guess we can now move on.
But Diaz
is
also big too, yeah. So it's a good battle.
Yeah, that's a good battle. So let's go on to what you've been waiting for so long, Austin. So the French, you know, the conservatives, being the cucks that they are, invited the French to, you know, invade and put, you know, an Austrian, you know, blue blood onto the throne of Mexico.
You can't write this. So the conservatives are inviting a European country to come invade. Like, this shit is just too. I'm sorry, but go on.
No, that's exactly what happened. So, you know, someone of the Habsburg line, you know, the inbred fucks of Europe, was placed on the throne of Mexico.
Like, Maximilian was pretty much just like kind of bored. He was a prince, right? And he's like, yeah.
He was not in line for succession. He was never going to become, you know, the Holy Roman Emperor or whatever.
He's basically Hunter Biden. Or no, sorry.
Biden. No, but
actually,
but
no,
just like Hunter Biden, he probably would have been a better president than his father.
Okay, I was going to switch it to Donald Trump Jr. because I was going to say Maximilian.
No, Donald Trump Jr. would be a worse president than, you know, Donald Trump.
Oh yeah, no question. I just meant that Maximilian was pretty good for nothing and was just kind of hanging out, shooting the shit, and then
but he had some actually good ideas as president. I mean, as emperor.
Yeah, true. I'm not the harshest critic of
the guy actually wanted to teach Nahuatl in schools. I mean, I know that's a little bit, you know, Indigenismo Aztec bullshit, but I mean, it's a fucking indigenous language. I mean, that they don't even do that in fucking Mexico today. Teach like an indigenous language as a second language.
Yeah, no, it's funny. Ironically, the European colonial leader is in some ways more
Respectful
yeah, more respectful and accommodating of
to
indigenous
the
culture
the majority
than
of the people that live in the fucking country.
yeah than Benito Juarez is.
Yeah, it's like, do you see how fucking insane that is? I
Yes.
mean, the guy was willing to give land, like land distribution to indigenous people. I mean, this is before fucking like Zapata fought and died for this shit.
Mhm. No, yeah, Maximilian was a true woke progressive.
Yes, he was. And just like every woke progressive, he went. The old saying goes, "Go woke, go broke," and he went broke, and then you know
and
he,
and
he
even
went
better, he
unwoke.
died. He died in a firing squad, ordered by an indigenous man.
Couldn't write any better story than this.
But
But yeah, so essentially, hilariously enough, though, Juarez, has to obviously set up his government in exile. His family goes to go live with the fucking Lincolns. So there's kind of like we can kind of start about the whole Lincoln, comparisons that so many assholes like to make.
oh yeah, first of all, it starts with the hat. I mean, I don't know if Juarez. I don't know anything about when he started wearing that hat. Was it before before Lincoln was a big name, or was that inspired by Lincoln? But just that
That probably was
hat.
a fashion that everyone was doing.
Okay.
I mean, you see
Okay. So
Grant with that fucking type of hat later when he's president.
yeah, I'm wondering if how
It's
much
like
of
the
a thing.
dapper hat.
Oh yeah, yeah, no question. I just mean in Mexico. I'm wondering how much of a thing it was, or if it was only
Yeah,
for like
that's a good
Americanized
question.
Mexicans, basically.
Probably. I wouldn't doubt that. Like American Europeanized Mexicans.
Yeah, he's just LARPing as Lincoln.
Even though Lincoln is like two like twice his size, literally.
Yeah, yeah, Lincoln could dunk on him.
Like he could probably eat him.
Um,
But enough with the fucking size comparisons. Let's actually talk about why that's an erroneous comparison. Yes, they
well,
both were fighting a civil war.
mhm. Yeah, and
No,
they're both supposedly the the how would you say it? They're like the saviors of liberalism in their countries, or at
yes,
least
that's correct.
that's I would say that's how liberals in both countries portray them. Like
Yes.
Mexican liberals,
And
like
and that
Krause.
is true, to be honest.
And oh yeah, and it is true. Yeah, you're right. Um, I mean, I just think they both okay. So liberalism has always been contradictory.
Yes, correct.
In that,
I mean, it naturally is.
so Lincoln, for example,
Yeah.
if he had the opportunity to, he wouldn't have even ended slavery. Like he wasn't initially opposed to
Right.
slavery.
But he
Um,
did change his viewpoint, and the opportunity did start bringing itself. He decided to end it because
yeah,
he was a diehard liberal himself, but he did
yeah,
abhor slavery.
yeah. Oh, I just mean that like you've heard his quote, right? If we could preserve the union, whatever,
Yes,
and keep slavery, like I'm just
yes,
getting at
correct.
that thing. And I think Juarez in some ways, like his dictatorial um tendencies as a leader. I'm not like they were totally necessary
Yes, I mean the
as a
same way
leader in
how
Mexico.
Lincoln got rid of habeas corpus.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I see them both as liberal dictators.
Yes.
They're and this is also, I mean, like just as the South calls the Civil War the War of Northern Aggression, the fact that Lincoln invaded in the first place, um, I mean, the North is trying to tell the South what to do, basically. Um, Obviously, the North is the North and South are just like transitioning into different economies. So South is keeping their like feudal slave economy, and North is transitioning to industrial capitalism, right? Um,
Right.
Juarez is also, I think, in the same way like the liberal dictator thing, where he wants to modernize by European standards Mexico. He
Mm-hmm.
wants to
Yeah.
end the communal land regimes, right? They're supposedly holding back Mexico's prosperity or whatever, and use the power of science and reason to bring Mexico into basically turn Mexico into a European country.
Yeah, essentially.
That's really what he jacks off to at night. Um, that's that's
All right,
that's
but
that's what he
get
wants.
to the point.
Uh-huh. Um, yeah, so I think the liberal dictator thing, like I think it just applies to both Lincoln and Juarez so cleanly. Um,
Right.
because
But
they're
I
both
here's what I want to wait. You have something else to say? Sorry.
oh no, go for it.
Right. So here's what I want to say are the differences. The differences is though is that Juarez really never changed his his viewpoints on who are the majority of the people that live in Mexico, indigenous people. Even though he should have seen that there was something obviously clearly wrong when a good portion of them actually supported Maximilian. I mean that should have told you something. I mean, it probably to him is like, oh no, that's because that they want to preserve their backwardness or whatever. I mean, because Lincoln ultimately in the end changed his views on slavery and African people. I mean, but Juarez never did, even though it should have been an eye opener. Like like why are so many of them joining Alvarez? I mean, not Alvarez.
Oh yeah.
Maximilian.
No, it's like Kamala. It's like Kamala and her level of support with the black community. It's like Trump had pretty historic numbers in this last election with black men. It's like damn, like
Like
black
3% though, but that's still something. I mean, higher than any other Republican since Nixon.
I thought for black men Trump was around like 30%, no?
That was Latinos or some shit like that. No, it wasn't. It was
Oh,
like
oh,
11.
Latinos too as well.
Yeah.
I thought it
No,
was
black people
between
was like
20 and
11%.
30.
No, it wasn't
Oh, okay.
30% for black people.
Okay, maybe I'm just overstating it then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was about to compare Juarez's level of support with indigenous people compared to a fucking colonialist Maximilian.
Yeah, no, but exactly. This is what I'm trying to say is that essentially, Maximilian, like the essentially in the end, ultimately, Juarez was actually fighting another liberal. Lincoln was not fighting, liberals. He was essentially fighting a bunch of, feudal aristocratic psychopaths.
Yeah, 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 true. Um, yeah, Lincoln was clearly like the only liberal in town, like the liberal. It was a clear liberal versus conservative thing there.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
literally, Juarez was fighting another fucking liberal. I mean, most of the
yeah,
monarchies in Europe were fucking liberals as fuck.
yeah, yeah, true. Um, yeah,
I mean, so it's hard to make these comparisons with Lincoln because Lincoln was literally fighting, a war to, preserve his, I mean, they were both fighting a war to preserve their nation. Had, they were liberal, almost dictators in a way. But ultimately, the comparisons end in the fact that Lincoln was fighting basically, a war against people that were trying to, continue, this mode of, system that is demonstrably evil. I mean, and Juarez ultimately was the one who was going to created a system that was demonstrably evil to indigenous people. So ultimately, Juarez was probably actually the Jefferson Davis of Mexican history.
yeah, yeah. Can't argue with
Ironically
that.
enough.
Yeah, he got what he wanted. But yeah, it's funny seeing how I don't know when the creation of Juarez is
Oh, that started with Diaz. He wanted to basically legitimize, like, he's basically the continuation of Diaz's legacy. I mean,
yeah,
Juarez's legacy.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I guess it really is Diaz, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, when this image of Juarez
What a
as like
pimp. I
this
mean, like you lose against this guy, but then later you use him as basically like, no, I am his successor.
he appointed me.
Yeah.
I didn't overthrow his actual successor.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
um yeah, it's funny because it's so misleading. Yeah, the image of Juarez is like the humble, nice guy, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah.
As leader when again, first of all, he really didn't even respect popular democratic will when it
Oh no,
was
definitely.
anti-liberal.
And he didn't do
Um
shit to actually enfranchise indigenous people into the vote.
uh-huh. Uh-huh. So it's like he's not. I do get that he's operating the best he feels he can given the circumstances, um, by being pretty basically a dictator.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is just funny seeing all the contradictions.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, the thing is, like, Lincoln probably would have given, enfranchising the vote to black men. I honestly do believe he would have done that.
oh yeah, no, I
Juarez,
thought
like,
that
yeah,
was
but I
part of
think
why he was assassinated, right?
essentially yes. But I'm just saying that, I mean, we can't be really too sure. But I mean, let's be honest, it probably would have happened under, Lincoln. But I mean, and also to consolidate, obviously, to increase the power of the Republican base. But I'm trying to get to
Yeah,
the point of Juarez is that Juarez actually, you know, was had a liberal mindset, Luis Mora, that the only way that indigenous people should be allowed to vote is if they, stop being indigenous. Meaning
yeah,
they do have the right to vote, but only if they stop being indigenous.
yeah. Yeah, basically, maybe Juarez would just be like, "Oh yeah, you can vote. They'll count all the votes, and then if it goes for the other candidate, let's say a conservative candidate,
Oh, that
he'll
too.
just have the Supreme Court overturn it, and he'll
Oh
say,
yeah,
"Oh,
definitely.
the Supreme Court has spoken."
Just like in the U.S.
uh Yeah, so
What a
he's
shitty dumb thing.
it's 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 fun to see the transition also from Diaz and Juarez because Diaz is just a little bit more openly caudillo strongman.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
Whereas Juarez is like, no, I'm operating. He would like lie and just be like, I'm operating within the rules of our constitution when like you
Yeah.
obviously aren't. When Diaz would just be like, what constitution?
What constitution? Or
I'm the
yeah,
constitution, bitch.
yeah, that's true. He kind of didn't give a shit about it.
Yeah. Like I think he was a dictator who's like inspired by liberal constitution, but he's still a dictator. Like I think of like any modern like military dictatorship, they're usually yeah, like inspired by some past constitution, but they obviously will operate outside of it
Yeah,
when they feel like it.
exactly. I mean, they still, like, like, pay homage to it, but at the same
Yeah.
time, they're like, they'll fuck it, they'll throw it in the trash whenever they wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, essentially, he wins, because the French get bitch slapped by the Germans, and they have to get, flee out of Mexico. And the United States, starts offering, real support after the Civil War. So Juarez essentially, wins, and the conservatives are, seen as traitors, and they can no longer do whatever the fuck they want. And so basically begins, the restoration period.
Yeah. And I think I used to think the conservatives really were traitors. Um and I mean they still are
Yeah, I mean,
in a lot of
they kind
ways.
of did invite a fucking European king to be, I mean, a European royal prince to be their fucking king. I mean,
Um I guess the only thing that I would
maybe they should have just made him marry, or like, like, have like a second wife or some shit like that, like one of Moctezuma's daughter, like,
oh yeah,
great
there you
granddaughter,
go.
something like that.
That would have made everyone happy. Um yeah, because the reason why I have some reservations about calling them full-on traders is just because when I look at the alternative, I look at Juarez, and it's not like he's uh, advocating traditional Mexican lifestyles either. Like he's literally seeking to transform the culture of like 90% of the entire country. So it's
I
almost
mean,
like
but a lot of these
he's
people probably were like, they probably still loved European culture themselves too. The conservatives.
oh yeah, well okay, so yeah, I
I mean,
agree
the
with that.
aristocratic aspects of it.
Yeah, absolutely. But I would just say that while they do that, that's just for themselves. They're not
Yeah, that's
seeking
true.
to
They don't give a shit about the
to
peasants doing that.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, they really just don't care. It's kind of like they don't care, whereas Juarez cares and he wants to change you.
Right.
Um
It's so weird though, because like you have these, like, these autocratic, feudal lords, and then you have these degenerate liberals that seek to end, indigenous way of life, like through almost cultural genocide. So it's like, who the fuck are you supposed to root for? Both of these people are like horrible people. Like there are no fucking heroes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I mean, there are
that's
a
why.
couple of liberals, but even themselves are like, yeah, we need to wane people in, like indigenous people into this cultural genocide slowly. I'm like, that's still fucked up, dude.
Yeah, that's why you have to love the frequent rebellions. It's awesome. Keeps things spicy, and the rebellions weren't just they weren't always a failure either.
Yeah.
I think um I mean back then I feel like rebellions were much more successful and feasible than
I mean, because the
they are in a
monopoly
lot
of
of models.
power was not,
Yeah.
exclusive to one place.
Yeah.
I mean, once Diaz really solidifies, central authoritarian liberalism, that's it. It's game over until eventually the cracks of his regime start wane. I mean, becoming more frequent.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I'm just thinking about like regional rebellions or just attempts now in more recent Mexican history, and it's just way to me it seems way harder to
Overthrow the state.
yeah, overthrow or even just have like a meaningful rebellion that can accomplish
Some
um
of the goals that you're trying to accomplish.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
I mean,
Like
I
in the short
love
term.
the Zapatistas of Chiapas, but
Yeah.
they really haven't done much.
Yeah. Yeah, and like their prospects of
I mean,
ever
they do
really
have their own autonomous region in Chiapas, so but I mean, the goal is ultimately for all indigenous people, not just for just a few pueblos.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Like back then these wars weren't just idealistic failures. They actually I mean
They had
sometimes they
meaning.
won.
They had an impact, or they did.
Yeah.
No, they did have meaning. What the Zapatistas did in 1991. I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. I mean like they had more of a lasting, longing impact.
Yeah, no, well, that's what I'm saying. Like
Yeah,
they were pretty successful,
yeah,
um, and that was kind of a fun thing to see about this entire time period. It's just
yeah,
that in many ways, like anything could happen.
yeah, and it did. I mean, like I said, like a fucking European like dipshit fail kid from some fucking Austria was given the throne of Mexico
Yeah,
while the U.S. was fighting a civil war and couldn't do shit about it.
and then you have an indigenous guy who hates indigenous people as the savior of the republic. Like
Yeah, the savior of the
it's
republic of a country that's like 90% indigenous.
it's it's just like this is so ridiculous, but I don't know. It's it's an amazing story. It's an amazing movie.
Yeah, so but that's essentially Benito Juarez's life, and it's because of Diaz and prominent and future leaders that are, because after this because Juarez basically begins the foundation of Mexican liberalism to actually have a foothold in Mexico, because it did exist with prior people like the first president of Mexico like Guadalupe Victoria, Vicente Guerrero, and other leaders like Freyes, but it really Juarez was the one who started this liberal project, this cultural genocide of indigenous people.
Yeah, yeah.
It's basically like how Trump got to do all the shit he did because Obama laid the groundwork, like with all the fucking drones, with the mass deportations, with the destruction of civil liberties. It's because of Obama gave him the keys, and he's like he went wild with the locks.
Yeah, and I think the executive order thing, um,
Oh yeah,
like
definitely.
like the way Juarez can pretty blatantly when
Disrespect the
the liberal
Constitution,
yeah when the liberal when the liberal laws and
the thing that he
constitution.
loves more than life itself.
Hmm. Yeah,
Hilariously enough,
he'll wipe his own ass with it when it's not working for him,
yeah.
um,
But then he'll cry about it.
and then he'll cry. I think Obama's pretty much the same idea where he'll he extols liberalism and norms and
He's
um
a constitutionalist lawyer, some liberals
yeah
say. So he should
and
be on the Supreme Court.
and after once Trump is president, he's talking about how Trump is a threat to democracy and blah blah blah, and it's I mean they're both just rulers by executive
I
order
honestly
first of all.
wonder what would have happened had Juarez lived. Would he would have done the same shit about complaining about fucking Diaz and constantly doing like plans to like get rid of him?
Yeah, actually that's an interesting question. Do you see Juarez as leading juntas and and
I
rebellions or
think so.
something.
I think so. It's very possible.
I
Maybe strong wordly letters and maybe a couple of plans, but not anything like a lot. Like how many Diaz tried.
yeah, because first of all, Juarez isn't a military man, so I'm wondering
Exactly.
how how far his support would go
That's true.
amongst the military, because I'm not seeing like a strong
And
base of
also
support
Diaz
there.
was very good at making on connections and making sure
Yeah.
alliances were intact.
Oh yeah, Diaz is one guy I would hate to try to lead a rebellion against.
Yeah.
Unless he's
Definitely.
like old and senile by
Yeah, he's turned into Biden.
yeah.
Because Biden in his day was basically kind of one of the top leaders of the Democratic Party. I mean, now
Yeah, yeah.
obviously he's a dying mummy that's being manipulated by his wife and Kamala and a couple other Democrats.
Yeah, it's actually kind of sad that Biden didn't run in 2016
It's
because
because I told you that he was basically like forced by Obama, who he believed was his friend, and backstabbed in 2020 because he took forever to support him. That he
uh-huh.
told him, no, let Hillary run, and then later you can have your chance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because back then like I think Biden was sharp enough to legitimately beat Trump.
Oh yeah, he
Um
would have done it. He would have beaten him. I
yeah,
mean, with
and then
his fake, populist bullshit, he would have been able to slam him.
yep. And then this time he pretty much just won because COVID. Like he didn't
Yeah,
really
because
have
of
to.
COVID.
He kind of just like cruised through the debates, and
And that
I mean,
actually is an interesting question. Like, had Juarez lived longer and cemented more, support for and legitimacy of his regime, would he have eventually been able to point a successor that would have been able to actually, stop Diaz? It's an interesting question to ask yourself.
yeah, I wondered if he would. Um,
Or what if he had done all the shit that Diaz did? And I honestly think he would have.
yeah, that's all. I don't think he would ever be as successful as Diaz. Um,
I mean, he would try.
yeah, he would try. I
Yeah,
don't
I
think
mean,
he
I'm
would
not
be.
stupid. I don't think he would be able to do the whole, alliances and that type of shit. That shit was obviously, something that was, fundamental to Diaz himself as a man.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't think I think his regime would just be like more rocky, just more turbulent.
Yeah,
Um,
I think you're probably right.
but damn, who knows? That's hard to say. There's so many variables. But no, I think he was in pretty solid standing by even by the time of his death. Like he's overall, I think the Juarez regime was like fairly solidified,
Yeah,
even
I agree.
despite the banditry and yeah, just like regional rebellions. He's still he's clearly like the leader of Mexico, and there doesn't seem to be
Yes.
any, even though Diaz like in a
Overthrew a
way like
successor.
yeah overthrew a successor. Diaz is still pretty much representing,
The
if
same
not the
ideas
same,
yeah,
yeah,
no,
if not the
essentially,
same
yeah.
ideology and interests, um, pretty damn close. Like it's so the level of difference is marginal.
And that's the interesting thing is that because people like to make this contrast of being that Juarez was the good president and Diaz was the bad president.
Yeah, yeah, that's hilarious, and that's actually what I was taught.
I
That
mean,
that's
everyone's taught that, even in Mexico. I mean, in
yeah,
Oaxaca, it's like basically like common lore.
yeah. No, that's what I was gonna say. Like before even like having any kind of formal lesson on this kind of stuff,
Yes,
um, just the in popular culture, and just the way these guys are remembered. It's like
yes,
Juarez, yeah, he's the good guy. Diaz is the bad
because
guy.
he was the main writer of the 1857 Constitution, which
Yeah,
gave birth to the 1917 one. So the people
yeah.
that won the Mexican Revolution essentially rewrote history to say that Juarez was the good guy and that Diaz was the bad guy because they overthrew him, obviously. So they had to basically make sure that their regime was legitimate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm like, damn, there you go. Um,
There's all your propaganda, boys.
yeah, because I'm sure Diaz probably got some of his vote rigging ideas directly from Juarez. So
Yes, I'm 100% sure. A lot of the things that Diaz got was straight from Alvarez's, fucking lizard mouth.
Yep. And similar idea with Trump to Obama. I'm sure some of Obama's executive orders just kind of inspired
Tickled
Trump even
Trump's
more.
fancy.
Yeah. Yeah, Trump's like,
Yeah,
I don't give a shit. Obama did it. Why can't I?
yeah. Why can't I? Fuck you. I'm the president, just like Obama said.
But yeah,
So
that's Benito Juarez.
yeah, that's Benito Juarez. You know, still a dipshit scumbag, but I still sympathized with him in some extent. I mean, but he still committed cultural genocide. So I mean, it's very hard to feel sorry for someone like that. It's kind of like feeling sorry for Hitler.
Yeah, I think here's how I see it. I see Juarez as some little book nerd, and he's born like around
To
a
very
bunch
impoverished
of.
conditions.
Oh yeah, no, I was gonna say some troll shit. Um,
Oh, don't go for it. You can even say it. I don't give a shit. Go for it.
oh
We're
no,
almost ending
I'm saying
anyway. So
he's just this nerd, and he's born around a bunch of people who just don't give a shit about like his books or something. So he just
yeah,
gets
fuck
like
his
really
books.
mad, and he wants to like basically artificially mandate that the bookworm is like the coolest guy in town. Like so he wants to just overturn the entire social order in his peasant community to
His
basically
narcissistic image.
subsidize all the nerds in town, right? Give the nerds clout and give the town Chad, I don't know, the big buff farmer,
I mean, this is
demote
some kind
him.
of Plato bullshit where philosopher kings should be the rulers.
Yeah, basically. That's pretty much what
You.
he's.
Fuck Plato. Fuck him
Oh,
and his pedophile ass.
yeah, philosophers are the very last group of people I would want having a powerful influence over
Yeah, I
society.
love Karl Marx, but I would never want him to be a statesman.
they, they'd probably, I don't know, mandate, I don't know, giving your child up to uh to wilderness because man belongs to nature and not to society, or so. I don't even know. Just
Who the fuck knows?
I'm scared of philosophers.
Yeah, same here. Don't trust them ever. But
But yeah, so that's
yeah,
Benito.
so yeah, that is Benito Juarez. Stay tuned for whenever we do the next episode. Which Austin, you said it's probably gonna be Madison, right? James Madison.
Oh yeah, James Madison's a good candidate. This was around the time of the storming of the Capitol, so Madison was on my mind. But
Yeah,
um,
I mean, or do you want to do
no,
someone else? We can totally
we'll,
do.
we'll yeah, we'll keep our ideas open. We'll keep our
Yeah,
ideas
we'll
open.
keep our ideas open. So but that was Benito Juarez. The tragic manlet of Mexico that essentially made Mexico from 90% indigenous all the way to fucking 10%.
He saved them, Chris. He saved them.
Yeah, he saved them by fucking forcing them to all to immigrate to the United States. So all you white supremacists, go if you have a time machine, you know who to go for. You know who to gun for.
Benito Juarez, the greatest white supremacist in Mexican history.
And that is where we'll end this.